Good day, everyone. I welcome you to this baking class. My name is Grace, and I'm the CEO of Bakes and Books. I want to thank the Beneficial Global Humanitarian Foundation for this opportunity to share my knowledge with you. And I want to encourage you that baking is not hard if you just go by the principles, just like any other aspect of life. If you work with the principles, you should do well in your baking business. Before we go into the baking class proper, I want to quickly gloss through the basics that you need to succeed as a baker. Baking is an art and a science. It's an art because it involves creativity. You work with ingredients, you measure them in different ways, and then you get different results. It could be the same ingredients, but you get different results depending on how you mix them up. And also, it's a science because you have to get the right balance of ingredients for you to get good results. So, quickly, I want to run through the equipment that you need. As a young baker or somebody that's just starting out, you don't need so many things. So when I started out, I didn't have all the equipment, and up till now I keep upgrading because you discover that you just have to keep upgrading as the times come by. But the basics that you need: number one, you need your measuring cups. Now this is a set that I have, and I'll encourage you to get a good set because there are some that I've discovered don't have the correct measurements. Some are slightly smaller, so make sure you have it. Usually one cup is about 240 to 250 mils, so you can just use that. When you buy your cup, you can use a form of measurement to measure it and make sure you get between 240 and 250 mils. That will be okay for you. So the measuring cups come in sets, and then they often come with spoons as well. So when we are talking about measuring in cake business, we are not saying that you should use a milk tin or just any cup or glass that you have in your house. You also have a standard measuring cup. Now this one, you have 1 cup, you have half cup, you have 1/4 cup, and you have the spoons, tablespoon, teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon. But this particular cup that I have, which I started out with, I think this was maybe like 15 or more years ago, that I started out with, is actually 1 cup, but it has measurements. I don't know whether you can see it on the inside, where you can use it to measure 1/4, half cup, 3/4 cup, or a full cup, as the case may be. So even if it is this type of cup that you start out with, you can still do well in your baking business. Okay, so you can have a whisk. Oftentimes we need a whisk in mixing. You have a spatula. This is a quite large one, but there are smaller ones in the market because I often do large mixes, so I ended up buying this large one, but I started out with a small one. And then you should have for measurement as well, your scale is important. Have an electronic scale. This is I think it's about the cheapest in the Nigerian market that you can get. And as long as it doesn't fall down or you hit it with things, it will last you for a while. Then you need a sieve to sift your dry ingredients. You need mixing bowls. Now this is a plastic mixing bowl. I got this again for some children a while back because it was light, so it was easy for them to handle in the class that I taught. But this is a large mixing bowl. This one belongs to my standard mixer. So whichever bowl, as long as it's a good bowl and it does the job, it goes well. We can also use an aluminium bowl. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put the aluminium bowl. We can use an aluminium bowl as well. It will do well. As long as the round, I want you to note the round. You can see the way this bowl goes down this way, so it helps you to mix in an even way. And the plastic bowl that I showed you earlier you see that it's styled in the same way. This style will help you in mixing your ingredients properly. Then you need your pans. I want to tell you a brief story about this pan. I got this pans, think about, that should be like maybe 18 years back now. This set of pans I first bought, this is a 6-inch pan. This is 7, this is 8. So I got these red ones, as you can see, they have well used over time. The reason why I brought this set of pans for you to show is because I want to tell you that you don't need to buy expensive pans. You have the one that's just the stainless steel colored. You don't necessarily have to buy those pans to succeed as a baker. With these ones, you do a good job of baking as well. But I will advise you that you should avoid dark colored pans. Now look at this one. This is really dark. This is black, and this one was red to start with. Well, the paint continued peeling over the years. But the thing is, if you want to get your pans now, these ones are cheaper. So if you want to get these cheap pans, try to look for ones that are light colored. The difference or the mix in your baking is the color of the outside of your cake. The darker the color of the pan is outside, the darker the outside layer of your cake will be as well. But it does not mean that they don't work efficiently. So it's just about how much do you have, and just invest in them. And when you are buying your pans as a startup, you necessarily don't need the bigger pans. Maybe you're going for 12-inch, 14-inch, 16-inch. The basics that you need for now, I believe, is basically your 6-inch, so that when people order 6-inch cakes, or your 8-inch. This is 7. This one is 7-inch. The thing about the pans is they come in odd numbers as well as even numbers. Personally, I bake with even numbers. So you have 6, 8, you have 10, 12, 14, and so on. And you also have the in-betweens. So the 7, the 9s, the 11. Though I've discovered that most people bake with the even inch pans. Okay, so I think those are the basic things that you need to start off as a baker. So when you're measuring, I want to quickly talk about measurements. So when we are measuring ingredients, we talk about, when you say 1 cup, for instance, we expect that it's not heap. It's not as if you just dip your cup into your ingredient, maybe your flour, for instance. No, you use your hand to scoop it in lightly, and then you use a knife or even your skewer stick, which is a good instrument, as small as it is, and you can just use it to smoothing it over like this, so that it's a level cup. So anywhere we talk about cup measurements, we are talking about level cups and not heaps. The same also goes for your spoons. When you're measuring things with your spoons, it should also be level as well, whether your baking powder, your spices, your baking soda, or whatever, so you can have a good measurement. So proper measurement is important to you having a good outcome. If your ingredients are not properly measured, you end up having a cake that has an issue, whether it is too dry or it is too wet, if your measurements are not done properly. Okay, so let me quickly go to this. So I've talked about pans, and when you are using your pans, usually we oil our pans. You oil with your butter and coat with flour lightly, just for a little flour in, and just coat it. So that one will provide a layer inside your cake, so that your cake does not stick to the pan. You can also use parchment paper or brown paper, but parchment paper is preferable. The only thing is that it's more expensive than brown paper, and you have to get to a good cake shop to get it, at least when you are here in Nigeria. But you can substitute with the brown paper. Please don't use the grocery bags, that is the ones that you use to package things in the supermarkets, because most often than not, they have wax covering them. So you don't need that wax. It's not, one, it will make the paper to burn, and two, it's not healthy for you as well, eating the wax. But if you just get a plain brown paper, that one will do the job. So we use it to line our pans. You see it when we get to the practical class. So you just cut the size of your pan. If you are using a 6-inch pan, then the circle, especially the bottom, you don't necessarily have to do for the sides. So especially for the bottom, so if it's a 6-inch pan that you're using, you cut 6-inch round paper, so like that, depending on the size of the pan that you're using. And when you are baking, if you don't use a pan that's too big or too small as well, so you have to consider the quantity of batter that you're using. And also you have to talk about ingredients. You have when it comes to sugar, there is granulated sugar, there is brown sugar, there is caster sugar. The recipes I'm going to go through today are based on granulated sugar, so it makes it easy for you. And also when it comes to flour, we're using all-purpose flour. Though you have different types of flour, you have self-raising flour, you have cake flour, you have corn flour. But for this class, we are using all-purpose flour, which we often use for baking. Once in a while, you may come across recipes that ask for self-raising flour or cake flour. There are substitutes for that in case you don't have them at hand. And then of course we have cocoa powder, which is also a flour, so we need that one when we're making our chocolate cake. Okay, that's an hint. So we are making a chocolate cake and we are making 2 other types of cakes, so let's just stop there. So then the fats, you have the oil, you have the butter. When you're using oil, if it's an oil-based cake, that is, we have vegetable oil in the cake, then I advise don't use canola oil or just your plain vegetable oil. Don't use groundnut oil or soya oil because they have their own flavors and they will lend those flavors to your batter. So at the end of the day, your cake may start, your supposedly vanilla cake or chocolate cake may end up tasting like soya or groundnut flavored cakes. Okay, and then when it comes to margarines, margarine is cheaper than real butter. Margarine is vegetable oil based, it's made from vegetable oils, while butter is made from milk. So your butter is usually more expensive, and you find it in departmental stores, supermarkets, usually in the freezers, so they can melt if you keep them out of the refrigerator, unlike your margarine that you can keep in your kitchen and it's still okay. And then of course there is shortening, which is white in color. Vegetable is also made from vegetable fat, but for the sake of this class we'll be working with margarine, which is cheaper and easier to work with for a startup baker. And also we are going to use eggs. You have eggs. Our advice is to use large eggs. Large eggs are about 60 grams. That is, when you crack your egg into a bowl and you put it on a scale, you weigh it, you end up with 60 grams. A lot of times you may have eggs that are not up to 60 grams. So all you need to do is just to calculate how many eggs have I broken. So you may discover that when you need 5 eggs, the recipe calls for 5 eggs. You'll discover that you may need to add an extra egg for you to have a round figure. 5 eggs is about 300 grams now. So you may need an extra egg or half an egg to make up for that. Okay, so I think then your raising ingredients are those are your baking powder, baking soda, yeast. Though most times you use yeast in bread. In cakes, basically you use your double acting baking powder or baking soda. Then when it comes to dairy, we also use dairy, buttermilk, or milk, as the case may be, in baking. So if you're using buttermilk and you don't have store-bought buttermilk, you can make yours by just adding 1 cup of milk to 1 tablespoon vinegar or lime juice or lemon juice, as the case may be. It will give you the same result. And then you allow it to rest for like 10-15 minutes before use. Then you have flavors. You have vanilla flavor, butterscotch flavor, chocolate, strawberry, lemon flavors coming in bottles. Now, because they come in bottles, it does not necessarily mean that you just pour the whole thing. You also measure. Too much of a particular flavor can spoil the taste of your cake. You won't like the taste at the end of the day. So everything is about measurement. That's why I said that cakes are a science. And also we have spices. You have nutmeg, cinnamon, cardamom, allspice, mixed spice. A lot of times we use these spices when we are working with fruit cakes, or maybe you're baking a banana bread or something. That's when we often use the spices. So if you say your cake is a vanilla cake, you should not now add nutmeg and cinnamon or whatever and make it so now become a nutmeg cinnamon vanilla cake. So when it's a vanilla cake, let it be a plain vanilla cake. Though there are some flavors that you can combine, maybe you add adding milk to vanilla and things like that in your ratios, but don't add spices to cakes just anyhow. And then of course you have your oven temperature, that is when you put your cakes into the oven. You might have an oven, sorry I forgot that in equipment, oven. So now if you don't have, there is a imported oven, gas ovens or electric ovens that a lot of bakers use, that I use as well. But you can use your stove if you are starting up, because that was what I started with. So you can just get a pot and that has a tight fitting lid. Put some sand into it. I learned some people even use salt, some use stones as a base for it, and then you can cover it with foil. Covering it with foil kind of locks up the smell of the sand from rising up and entering your batter in the process of baking. So because when you use something else apart from your gas oven and or electric oven, if you're using a coal oven or you are using the stove oven whereby you put sand, they have a way of blending the sand, or coal have a way of blending their flavors to the cake. But I thought giving you an idea, and I'll cover it off with foil so that the smell won't be that pronounced. Okay, so and usually we preheat our ovens before we put our cakes in, except otherwise in the cake setting you may come across recipes that say you put your cake inside a cold oven. And then of course when it comes to storage, you have to store your cake well, usually in a cool place, so that your cake will last long. If you put your cake in the refrigerator that you keep opening and you don't have constant electricity supply, it will surprise you that it will spoil faster than you putting your cake on a counter, keeping it in a tightly covered container on a counter. So cakes, depending on the ingredients or the method of baking, vary in their shelf life. So but what I'll be teaching you today, at least you have your vanilla cake will last at least 5 days outside the refrigerator. Your chocolate cake will do the same. The red velvet cake is a particularly sensitive cake, so I've discovered that it could spoil a little faster, so you may not have more than 3 or 4 days grace for that. So, and when it comes to storing in the refrigerator or storing in the freezer, wrap your cake tightly with cling film, and maybe after that with foil before storing inside your freezer refrigerator, and avoid putting things on it. Don't just dump your bowl of pepper on it. It's going to compress and reduce the height by the time you want to use it. And when it comes to packaging, by the time you want to deliver your cake, your packaging matters as well. So all these things are the basic things that you need to consider before you say yes, I want to go into baking. And I believe there are simple things. If you just go through these principles again, you could replay the video, you'll discover that there are things that you can master and they're easy if you are just patient. Cakes need patience. They are babies. So from this point, I think we can move on to our practical class. Okay, so here we are in a practical class now. I want to show you how we measure the flour. So I'm using a tablespoon to scoop because I don't want to get my hands dirty, but you can use your hands as well. So you shake it in. I'm shaking the spoon so that it's not as if I'm just dumping everything inside. So you have it just sticking out a bit, and then you can use a spoon or knife, a level spoon or knife, to taper it off. Okay, so here you have your 1 cup of flour. So I'm going to pour that. So now we've measured the flour. I've already measured the cocoa powder in the same fashion. So this one, we are going to start with chocolate cake in this class. So we're starting with the chocolate cake. I've actually picked the easy recipes that turn out well, that will impress your customers and yet will give you little stress or no stress at all. So I've measured the dry ingredients. I've measured, this is a cup of, so for your chocolate cake you need a cup of flour, you need 1/4 cup plus 1/8 cup cocoa powder. You can use that one, you can use a scale to get the accurate measurement, so it should give you about 30 grams. So then you are going to have 1/4 cup of oil, 1 egg. Remember I said you should use large egg. You're going to use vanilla. You're going to use vanilla, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So for the raisin ingredients, so I measured baking powder 1 teaspoon, 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. They are 2 different things. If you get to a cake shop, they'll point it out for you. And then I have 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So we have our measurements there. So we have our dry, so we are going to sift our dry ingredients to make sure that we don't have any lumps whatsoever. But before we do that, I want to teach you how to oil your pans so that on your own you can do it. I most likely won't repeat this in the video because of time. So I just dipped my silicone brush inside margarine and I'm using it to coat my pan. So make sure you coat it very well. Make sure that every inch of the pan, of the inside of the pan, is covered with the margarine. The next step is that I'm going to add maybe like a tablespoon of flour to make sure that it covers the inside. So you just, this is it, I pour the flour inside, so just shake it around. So what I'm doing is I want to make sure that the flour coats the inside. If you have not coated a particular place well with margarine, you see holes inside your pan telling you that that place is not, you'll see that there is no oil in a particular place, so you can touch it up with oil and then dust it with the powder again. So the remaining flour, you pour it out because you don't need it again. So if you are going to use that is if you are going to use parchment paper or brown paper to coat, to line your pan, let me quickly teach you how to do that as well. So here's my brown paper that I'm using. So you can just put your pan on it. I hope you can see that. We just put your pan on it and put the base of the pan on it and draw a circle around. So once you've drawn the circle on it, I hope you can see that when you've drawn the circle, all that's just left is for you to cut it out. So here you have, I've cut one out now. So I'm just going to put it inside my pan. So you're just going to put it inside carefully, making sure it doesn't scrape the sides. And there you are, you have it, you have your pan lined. So now we're just going to move on to the mixing of the batter. So seeing that our dry ingredients and wet ingredients are set, I intentionally put the dry ingredients on my right and my wet ingredients on my left, so that as to make things easier for me and so that I won't forget any particular ingredients. One thing I can advise you to do is to have your recipe book, your notebook, or wherever you have jotted the recipe in. So I've said that for the chocolate cake that we are making first, you need 1 cup of flour, you need ½ cup of sugar, you need 1/4 plus 1/8 cup of cocoa, that's about 30 grams. Your baking powder is 1 teaspoon, baking soda is 3/4 teaspoon, salt is half or 1/4 teaspoon, depending on how you like it salty. The salt is just for the balance. And then you have a buttermilk, which is ½ cup. For the buttermilk, what I mentioned it when I was talking earlier, that you simply use for 1 cup of buttermilk, you add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, lime juice, or vinegar to 1/4 cup of milk. So that's how to make it. And after you have made it, you can remeasure so that you get your accurate 1 cup. Then your vegetable oil is 1/4 cup for this particular recipe. You have eggs. You have just 1 egg for this recipe, and the vanilla is 1 teaspoon. And we're going to use boiling coffee to spice it up, to spike up the taste. And the boiling coffee will be ½ cup. So we are going to start with the mixing of the dry ingredients first. Now we are going to need to sift. So here's my sieve, and then so you can pour in the 1 cup of flour. If you measure that 1 cup of flour, it should give you about 125 grams. I'm going to add the baking soda, baking powder, and salt into the mix. Okay, so I'm going to add my cocoa. So basically I'm adding all the dry ingredients together at once. Then we sift the ingredients together. It's not as if you cannot sift them differently, but this makes your job a lot easier. You do it at once, and to a large extent your cocoa and flour blends in well to a large extent. Okay, so I've sifted. To make sure that my ingredients are well incorporated, you can whisk it together to get it. Okay, so here you have a well combined dry ingredients. Now we are going to go on to mix the wet ingredients. We add the dry ingredients in 1 cup, in 1 bowl rather. So for this, I'm going to pour everything inside 1 bowl as well, apart from the coffee. So I'm pouring in my buttermilk. This is ½ cup of buttermilk. I'm adding my egg, 1 egg. Then I'm adding in my vanilla, my 1 teaspoon vanilla, and then my oil, 1/4 cup oil. So these are the wet ingredients I'm using. It's only the coffee that I have not started, that I have not added yet. We add the coffee after we have mixed in this one. So it's not as if I'm not beating it, I'm just stirring it together, stirring the ingredients together with my whisk. So now we are going to make a well. When I say make a well, it's like digging a hole in the middle of my bowl. So having incorporated the wet ingredient side. Now I'm going to add my hot cup of coffee, boiling coffee. Gradually, you can do it maybe half cup at a time. The coffee you are adding to it gives, it's called blooming. It makes your cocoa to bloom and to give you that chocolate flavor, for chocolate flavor to come out better. So I've added it gradually, then I add the remaining. So I added it in 2 batches. So by the time you finish doing this, you have what we call a thin batter. That is, it's quite liquidy. So when you have it this way, don't be afraid, you are still on point. So I'm just stirring to make sure that I have everything. Try to scrape the bottom of your bowl to make sure you incorporate it, and the sides to make sure you incorporate all the dry ingredients. Okay. So what's left now is just for us to pour it inside our pan. You can see it's very easy. I told you that I chose an easy recipe for us. So we are simply pouring it. Let me show you the consistency. You can see. So I'm pouring it into my pan that we have greased and lined. The lining of the pan, especially the bottom of the pan, helps your cake to come out in one piece. Because if your cake has not cooled down and you try to turn it out, it will break. So actually what we do is we'll bake this cake at 350 degrees centigrade. So here we have poured it into the pan. So, and before we place it in the oven, I'm going to tap it like 2 or 3 times. What I've done is to get rid of the air bubbles that may be in the cake. So it will reduce the chances of me having holes in my cake. So our chocolate batter is ready, and now we can put it in the oven. Okay, so we'll move on to our red velvet cake now. For our red velvet cake, we will need 2 cups of flour. I've already measured it out because of time. We will need baking soda, 1 teaspoon. You need salt, 1 teaspoon, and baking powder, 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon each. Okay, so we will need 2 tablespoons of cocoa. I've measured it out as well. So basically these are the dry ingredients that we will need for this particular cake, for this red velvet cake. And then of course we should not forget our sugar, but we will not add the sugar until we have sifted these dry ingredients. So we are not sifting the sugar with the dry ingredients. So let's sift quickly. Okay, once we have done with the sifting of the dry ingredients, we can add the sugar in, and then we stir it together. You see that we are using basically more or less like 1 bowl. This is what we call 1 bowl method sometimes. Some will say that they will pour everything inside the bowl, but I believe that mixing the dry ingredients separate from the wet ingredients reduces the chances of maybe your eggs not mixing well. So now we are going to check for our wet ingredients. So we are going to start with our buttermilk, 1 cup of buttermilk. This is your buttermilk. By the time you add vinegar to it, it would have curdled. Okay. So we have 1 cup of buttermilk. The essence of the buttermilk, instead of ordinary milk, is to make it more fluffy. So we are using 2 eggs this time around. We are using vanilla, 2 teaspoons vanilla. So we are going to mix this together to start. Let's make sure that our egg mixes well into the ingredients. Now, after doing this, we are going to add it to our dry ingredients, just like we did for the chocolate cake. But if you are using dry coloring, for this one we're going to need half teaspoon. I'm using dry coloring. There is actually red velvet coloring, so you can get that one in the market. So it usually comes in powder. So you can add it to your wet mix to make sure that it is well incorporated before you add other things. So now look at the color. We have a reddish mix already. Okay, so we are going to add the wet to the dry. So remember, our dry ingredients is 2 cups flour, 1 teaspoon baking soda, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon salt, cocoa 2 tablespoons, and sugar we use 1.5 cups. 1.5 cups is about 300 grams. Okay, so let's pour it in, maybe in 2 batches. So I'm adding in the remaining wet ingredients. So there we go, we mix it in as well. You can see the red color popping now. Don't just add coloring to your red velvet cake, your maybe vanilla cake, and call it a red velvet cake. No, they will taste differently because of the combination of the ingredients that we have done now. Okay, so we are going to add boiling coffee next. So we are adding half cup of coffee. Boiling coffee was very hot. Add in gradually. You don't have to mix fast. You don't want holes in our cakes or to make it soft. So just pour the coffee in and gradually mix it. As you will see from this batter as well, it will be a very loose batter. It will be thin as well. When I pour into the pan, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so we have added all our ingredients now and we have mixed it together. You don't need to overmix. Don't overmix, please. So once you have mixed well, you see that all the ingredients are well incorporated, then you pour into your pan and get ready to bake. Ideally, you should not fill your pans more than 2/3 of its volume. Okay, so just as we did the other time, we tap it 1, 2, 3. So that's to make the air bubbles escape, and then we can bake for 30 to 35 minutes as well, or 350 degrees centigrade. So from this point, we are going to go on to our butter cake, or vanilla butter cake. So this is usually the one that a lot of Nigerians here call sponge cakes. But sponge cakes are a bit different in that they are more hairy, and the process is a bit complicated for somebody who is a first-time baker. So this one, this vanilla butter cake that we are going to make, we are going to need butter and vegetable oil. But in this case, I'm using margarine and vegetable oil, ordinary vegetable oil. Remember, your oil should not have any other flavor, maybe soya or groundnut or whatever. Okay, for our vanilla butter cake, we are going to need butter, as I mentioned earlier, and vegetable oil. So let us work on that to start with. So I'm pouring this into the bowl. I've poured the oil into the bowl. Then I'm going to scoop the butter into the bowl as well. Now this butter is about 57 grams, so I'm using margarine instead of butter. I'm using a hand mixer for this, so I'm just going to mix. I'm going to start from low to incorporate the butter, the margarine, the vegetable oil. Once incorporated, I'm going to start adding my sugar. Then I pour in the remaining sugar. Once incorporated, you can increase the speed to medium. So we do until 5 minutes. So you might need to scrape down the sides intermittently while mixing to make sure that your 3 ingredients, that is your margarine, vegetable oil, and sugar, are well incorporated. So we'll still mix further. The idea is to make sure that the sugar is well blended into the butter and vegetable oil, as well as to make holes or air bubbles inside the mix. Because we are using margarine and or even if you're using butter, you won't get the same texture as you will get if you're mixing only, if you're using margarine and sugar only. So once again, I'm going to toss and spray. So I'm going to mix for another 1 or 2 minutes before I add any other item. You can see that the color is lighter than when we start mixing. If you compare it to the color of the margarine, I want you to see the margarine was a deeper shade. Now you have a lighter colored mix. Okay, so my 1 minute is gone, so I'm just going to add in the eggs one at a time. So we are using 2 eggs. From the time you start mixing to you start adding eggs, if you are using a hand mixer like I'm doing, it will not be more than 5 minutes. If you don't have a hand mixer, you can use your hand as well. Just wash your hands clean, dip it inside the bowl and mix. So make sure that the egg is well incorporated before you add the second one. Whenever you are baking using eggs, you add the eggs 1 at a time. So I'm adding the second egg now. Once the egg is well incorporated, I'm going to stop mixing. I want to scrape the sides down. Then I mix for maybe 10 seconds. And at that time, I believe it will be ready. So, there we go. So we have stopped mixing. We are going to add the other ingredients one after the other. Now I want you to pay careful attention to how we mix the remaining. Now you know we have mixed our butter, vegetable oil, sugar and eggs. So we used that butter was 57 grams, which is equal to 1/4 cup. We used vegetable oil for 1/4 cup as well. And the sugar, we used 225 grams. That is 1 cup plus 1/8 cup. We'll give you 225 grams. A cup of sugar is actually 200 grams. So then we used 2 large eggs. As I've said, eggs, do your best to make sure that your eggs is about 60 grams. 55 to 60 grams would do you good. So we are going to mix in the dry ingredients and some wet ingredients. So for the remaining mix, we are going to need 1.5 cups of flour. We are going to use buttermilk, 150 mils. That's about 1/2 cup plus 1/8 cup. It should give you 150 mils anyway. Now you have vanilla. The vanilla will be 7.5 mils. That's 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla flavor. So but we add my baking powder. I'm using baking powder of 1.5 teaspoons. So I've sifted the baking powder into my flour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my flour. I add like 1/3 of it into the mix. Now you must be careful. The mixing must be slow. This is what we call folding in. So you just dip into it and then you turn it over. Okay. So once you see that the flour has disappeared into the mix, you start adding your buttermilk. So your buttermilk, we are going to add it in 2 portions. So just use your eyes to gauge what 2 portions will look like. So I'm adding half of the buttermilk now. I'll stir it in gently, making sure to try to scoop what we have at the bottom of the bowl out and turn it over slowly so as not to make your batter collapse. That is, the air that you have trapped in the side when you were beating will escape if you beat too vigorously. Okay, so I add my flour, like another 1/3, then I fold it in slowly as well. You can see that I'm using a spatula this time around. I'm not using the mixer. So once you have finished folding in, you can add your remaining buttermilk and your vanilla flavor. The remaining buttermilk and your vanilla flavor. So just stir it in gently. Don't be in a rush. You see that it looks as if it's curdling. That's one of the reasons why you shouldn't just pour the milk in at once. You know, all our ingredients, anytime you are baking a cake, all your ingredients must be at room temperature. And you know, fat and water are not friends. So by the time you're adding the milk, your batter might curdle a bit. But if you're adding it gradually, you shouldn't have that problem pronounced. So now I'm going to add the remaining flour to the mix. And just as I've said, folding in, you lift it like this, you turn it over, lift it again, turn it over. So that's what you do till your batter is properly mixed. So all this mixing that we're doing, it should not take you more than 3-4, maybe like 3 minutes, because you must not over mix your batter. If not, the gluten will form into it, that is the protein will form in your batter and it will make your cake tough. So after a few turns, I've mixed everything in. If you feel that any is sticking to your spatula, which most likely it will, you can scrape it down with a spoon. And then we mix again. Okay, so we are done, and now we can pour it into our prepared pan. It is greased and lined just as I did for the other 2 cakes. This particular pan is a 6 inch by 4 inches. It's 4 inches tall. But I'm going to fill it just about halfway. And see, I did halfway. I'm going to tap on the counter smoothing the top if it is rough, but naturally everything will melt as well. Just try to level it. Okay. This particular cake batter doesn't, when it finishes baking, it doesn't do. So we are going to place it in the oven and wait for it to cook or to bake. It will take about 30 to 35 minutes to, using 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So the 3 cakes that we have worked on so far, we are using 350 degrees Fahrenheit and we are baking for about 30 to 35 minutes. It depends on your oven. So ovens vary, oven temperatures vary, even when you say you are set it to that 350. And that's like hot when you are using oven, when you are using maybe stove oven or charcoal. That's hot. It is not very hot as you use for bread. So it is. So but the thing about it is, because it's the same temperature that we are using for the 3 cakes, it's possible for you to quickly mix. It's better if you have measured all your ingredients ahead anyway, so that you don't leave any of your batter hanging out for 15-20 minutes max before you bake. Why? Your baking soda starts reacting immediately it touches liquid, or liquid touches it. The baking powder, you will see that it says double acting baking powder. That means it will start work while you meet cold, while it is cold, when liquid first touches it and when you place it in the oven. So you can bake the 3 cakes at the same time. That's just if you have a gas oven that the 3 pans can fit into. So that means we are going to bring the cakes out about the same time. So how do I know if my cake is done? From the smell. You will start smelling cake. You start smelling that cake smell. So that gives you an idea that your cake is almost done. So by the time you start smelling, it's not burnt smell, but sweet vanilla or sweet cake smell. Check your cake if it's done. Don't check before 25 minutes. So at the end of 25 minutes, you can check if your cakes are done. If one is not done, I just know the one that's not fully done, the extent of the doneness. So how do I know if my cake is done? If I use this skewer, you dip the skewer inside it, and then you don't have any batter sticking to the skewer again, that means your cake is done. So you can do that test, maybe it's about 25 minutes, and then check again another 10 minutes if it's not done yet. Also, the quantity of butter will determine, the quantity of butter and the size of the pan will determine how fast your cake will cook. So if you are using more butter and you fill an 8-inch pan or 10-inch pan to the same level that we have filled this, it's going to take a slightly longer time. So you can just check it when it's maybe like 40-45 minutes, check if it's done. But if it's an 8-inch pan, for instance, I know that by the time you spend like 1 hour, averagely the cake should be done. And then, but check at 40 minutes. Just as I said, oven temperatures vary. Also, if you are going to make buttermilk, if you don't have it, or you need 6 level tablespoons of powdered milk. Pour it inside a cup. Then you add water to fill the cup. You can use your eye to gauge it. Okay, what will 15 ml of vinegar, what space will it occupy? So you just a little before it fills up, then you add your vinegar. You don't just stir quickly once or twice, just your spoon going around twice, and leave it to curdle. So then you leave for 15 minutes, as I've said earlier, and then your buttermilk will be ready. And while your cake is in the oven, just as I've said, don't be picking at it. I know you'll be so excited about how is my cake going. Don't be opening your oven. If it's a small cake that we are baking, it is 6-inch, and this quantity of butter that we have mixed, you don't need to check until it is minimum of 25 minutes done before you check it. And okay, somebody was saying, okay, that I didn't mention it. The red velvet color, why do we add the vinegar? The vinegar helps the color to be bright. So don't omit the vinegar. It helps that red color to come out well. Also, while baking, avoid shaking your oven. For instance, maybe you want to cook at that particular point in time. I will advise you to finish your cooking before you start baking, so that your oven won't shake in the process of you stirring or making your amala on top of the oven, which could shake your batter and make it to deflate. Also, when you open the oven before the cake is almost done, the cold air can make your cake batter to deflate, and then you have it sinking in the middle. Okay, lastly, in our recipe book for this training, we'll be looking at coconut and peanut candy. Some people call it granite. It's slightly different, but more or less the same thing. So we'll need coconut 1 cup packed. That is, it has you fill it your cup very well. Then you need granules of 1 cup as well. Sugar, I'm using 3/4 cup, and I'm using cinnamon. This is my cinnamon. I'm using cinnamon of just 1/4 teaspoon to spice it, and this is salt as well. So the salt is 1/4 teaspoon, and the cinnamon is also 1/4 teaspoon. So moving on, we are going to make our coconut and peanut candy. We are going to be needing 3/4 cups of sugar, 1 cup granules that they are broken into pieces. You can break it in your pestle, break it into smaller pieces, and then 1 cup of coconut. If you look at the coconuts very well, you discover that I've packed my cup full, so it should be packed. And then for spices, I'm using salt. I'm using just 1/4 teaspoon salt and 1/4 teaspoon cinnamon. You could use nutmeg if you wish, just for you to have a nice taste. So we are going to have to melt the sugar, which we are going to start now on the stove. So we melt the sugar, and then we add the other ingredients gradually. So come with me. Pour your sugar in 3/4 cup sugar, and we're going to wait for the sugar to melt. Let me pause. So you should melt the sugar on low or medium heat max. I can see that the sugar is beginning to melt. You can see it bubbling there, so that means the sugar is beginning to melt. Stir gently. So we do this, we gradually mix and allow it to melt till it's all done, till everything has melted. That the sugar has melted now, so don't allow it to get too brown, if not it will burn. But at this level, we can go ahead to use it. You might still find a few lumps of the melt when you pour the other ingredients in. So the first thing we are going to do is to add our salt, so that it will melt with the sugar. Then you can do the cinnamon as well, so that they go into the sugar. It will be easier for you to blend the other ingredients in. So then turn in your coconut, the 1 cup coconut, as well as your granules. So your job now is to keep stirring till the sugar, granules, and coconut are well incorporated. This will take a few minutes, and just keep stirring to make sure you get that consistency that you want. So you will turn, keep turning. You need to press it down so that the sugar will go in with the coconut and the groundnuts. So I'm mixing, still mixing on low heat now. So use your spoon to try to scrape the sides of the pan as you work. So we'll work till we are sure that the ingredients are well combined. Now the kind of pan that we use for this, make sure that you are using a pan that's thick. Use a skillet or a thick bottomed pan to work. This way prevents your sugar from burning while melting, and it also prevents your other ingredients from sticking by the time you add them. Now you can see, yeah, it looks as if we have the mixture is now well, how do I put it? Looks as if it is well combined, and you may tend to see some bubbles if you look at the bottom of the pan as time goes on, because the coconut itself will secrete some juice. Some of the coconut juice or milk will get into the mix. So we'll wait for it to be well incorporated, and we make sure there is no moisture or extra juice left in the pan before we turn our mixture out. In the meantime, you can scrape the ones that are sticking to your spoon. You can scrape them back into the pan. Be careful not to touch the mixture because it will be very hot. So let's keep stirring. Looks as if the moisture has been well absorbed now. So we are just going to pour inside the tray and allow the mixture to cool slightly. It must not cool too much, just it will be warm as long as you can touch it, because we're going to mold it into balls. So I'm pouring the mix into a tray to cool down. So just allow it to cool down until it's warm enough to touch, and then we'll form into balls. So I'm going to rub some vegetable oil on my hand to make the molding easier. So you can use, so that you have accurate measurements, I've also oiled this tablespoon, so I can use this to just scoop it into my palm. Then I'll mold it quickly. The vegetable oil prevents it from how do I put it? It prevents it from sticking to your palm. Do it like that till it comes together. So you can put it on a plate Then we go on to have another one. So you have to do your best to work fast. Like, make sure that everything sticks together, and then before it starts, how do I put it? It gets cold and becomes hard. So we go on like this till we have done everything, we have rolled everything. So you leave it this way and allow it to cool down properly. By the time it's properly cooked, it would have stuck together very well. A tip is squeezing it together very well when you are rolling the balls, so that the balls will not unroll as they cool. But once they are cool, they would have become firm. So with this, we can sell. You can package and sell individually, and you can include it in your small chop plates if you so wish. So you remember I said I used the 3/4 cup sugar, so it's not too sweet. But if you want it sweeter, you can increase the sugar to 1 cup. So here marks the end of our practical class. So bringing the cakes out of the oven, so I'm going to turn them out. So I want to show you how to do that. So we're going to have the doneness test then before turning them out. Okay, so to test whether the cakes are done, you should do this in the oven and not out. So put your skewer in to check if they are done. I already checked before bringing them out of the oven. So if you put your skewer in and your skewer doesn't come out clean, that means the cake is not done yet. So you still allow it to cook for a while. Then the same. So practically that's how to do that. Call a cooling rack. So, and if you a cooling rack start, I think the prices start from around 2,500 or 3,000 Nigerian naira. But assuming that you don't have one, but you have an old refrigerator, abandoned refrigerator in the house, they have something like this. In those days, they have to have metal racks, so you can get something like that to cool your cakes. The idea is to make sure that the air circulates under, so that your cake can cool down faster. But even in the absence of that, you can still place it on your cake pan to cool. So to do that, we are going to have to use a knife. The cake should have cooled down at least 10, max 15 minutes in the pan before you attempt bringing them out of the pan. Except you have a recipe, you come across a recipe that clearly states that you shouldn't bring them out of the pan. But generally, the general rule is you allow your cake to cool for like 10 to 15 minutes before bringing out. So you're going to use, so the pan is fairly cool now, so I can touch it. So use a knife. You use a knife round the cake. That will help you loosen the cake at the edges, the inside edges, at the bottom edges, and it will also help you if you lined the cake pan, it will help loosen the paper away from the pan. So after doing this, you can flip over gently, then turn over. Okay, so we'll do the same for the remaining cakes too. So I've turned out the remaining cakes now. So if I want you to see something, I want you to see the bottom of the cake. You can see that the cake is not burnt. So by the time you turn your cake out, what you should do is you allow it to cool down before removing the paper that you used to line, whether parchment paper or brown paper that you used to line your pan. So you then remove it carefully. This has fairly cooled down anyway before I brought it out, so you see that your cake will come out nice. do it carefully, especially around the edges, and then you see that you don't have a burnt cake. So that's how you turn your cakes out. Now assuming, you know, like I made 3 flavors now, your customer may ask for a 3 flavored cake and things like that. So you have made this cake. All you need to do is to put them on top of one another. So to achieve that, what we simply do is, usually what I do is I look for the heaviest of the cakes. You can see that this cake is fairly taller. The red velvet is a bit taller than the other cakes. So I'll simply, or even if it's not taller, cakes are usually heavier than the other depending on the ingredients. So you trim, and then you can place the next cake on it, whether you want it to be the chocolate or you want it to be, so what, before putting it, what you usually do is buttercream. Because of time I didn't make buttercream, but normally we use a little buttercream in between, what some people, most Nigerians call butter icing. You just use a little, hold it that way, and then you trim again. The reason why I'm trimming these ones is because they are not level, they didn't bake level. So there are some cake recipes that don't bake level, so you just need to trim. But I think I enjoy trimming my cakes. The vanilla cake, the top is soft and doesn't need trimming, it's level. Usually this particular vanilla cake recipe turns out flat. The top is usually flat. So you buttercream again, or put any filling of your choice, and then you put on top of this. So that's the way you have your 3-layered cake. So cake decoration actually is another class, but I just like to do this. So what we usually do, you can see this skewer. You can use a few skewers, put them inside to hold your cake in shape while you are decorating. And sometimes we use at standard is you use dowel rods. So when you get to the market, you get dowel rods as well. So you just place because the small cake is a 6-inch cake, you don't need more than 2 or even 1. 1 is okay for this 6-inch cake, just in the middle, and then you decorate. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can post your questions, then I'll answer them. So once again, I want to appreciate Beneficial Global Humanitarian Foundation for this opportunity to share with us how we can start a baking business. And just as I said earlier, you can ask your questions and I'll be ready to answer them. I'm still Grace Oladapo from Bakes and Books. We're into cakes and we're into books as well. But just as I said earlier, that we went through cake baking today. And we are in Ibadan. So you cannot in Ibadan or your state, Nigeria. But as I've said, you can always ask your questions and I'll be ready to answer them. Thank you everyone, and I wish you all the best in your baking business. Thank you.